Oh, hey guys!
Hey.
Didn't see you there. Just working on our talent that we have.
The one that we have.
Yeah, not everyone can do that.
They can't? I mean, I guess there's a few that can.
Mm-hmm. Try it at home. Well, you can add
There's your
that to your
challenge.
you can add that to your list of things, your quarantine skills that you learn.
Tricks to learn while at home.
All of your friends are going to be impressed.
All of them.
Yes.
Every single one.
Every single one of
We
them
can guarantee
will
it.
be impressed. So, like, now that you are getting started on that, you guys are here because we've been doing a podcast. This is the Studio Steele podcast. I'm Ben.
I'm Ryan.
And we are talking about faith.
Yeah.
We're talking about owning your faith, taking ownership of it, investing in it, and being intentional in growing that.
Yeah.
Right. So you're owning your faith and like you're exploring aspects of it. And so our purpose in doing this is to give you some ideas in how to explore that. So I've been calling them arenas that you can explore and endeavor to think about. And so today's about action.
Yeah.
We were looking at the church last week and what it is and why it's important to get involved with that community, right? Like more than just like an empty hollow building.
Yeah.
It is an active people. And in that activity, you're going to want to serve.
Yeah.
And really, like when we say serve, like there are ways to be, I guess, like you can say like individualistic about your faith, like honing that in. But there are also ways to live your faith outwards as well. And that's where you're going to start to get into the arena of serving.
Yeah.
And really it kind of looks like what you do for other people.
Yeah.
And there's no one way to do that.
No.
There's lots of different ways that we're going to kind of explore those right now. But that's where we're going today with this podcast.
Yeah, we thought that we looked a lot at learning your faith, developing your faith, continuing to grow in it. And we think the next thing that we're called to biblically is to do something with that faith.
Yeah, Ephesians, Paul writes to that church in that letter. He says that you were created in Christ Jesus for good works, to do good works. So this idea that God has in mind for us to do works, right? And I think a lot of times when you get into a church setting, you have a church staff that is paid, right? And we talked about this a little bit last week, where like the pastor or the church staff is expected to do the service of the church, right? When in reality, this is a call that's placed on every follower of Christ.
Yeah.
Every single one.
You look at the scriptures in both Matthew and in Acts when they're retelling the last things that Jesus says to the disciples that have been following him. The last command that he gives is to go out to teach what has been taught to them. And this is said in different ways, but both of these accounts show the need to take what you've learned and to go and spread that.
Yeah. Yeah, so definitely check out those passages too. And a passage that I'm always drawn to in this regard is 1 Corinthians 12. You can check out that one too. But Paul gives this analogy of a body working together towards a purpose, to function together towards a common vision or a common goal, right? And I mean, I think about, it's a brilliant analogy. Think about your own body, right? Like each has like a different part, a different function, all keeps you alive, right? And so in the church, in the community, the global church, the local church, the global and the local, there are roles for each person to play, and then that God has planned that out for each person. Crazy,
yeah.
You know.
And I think that shows this is a really good example of showing what we're talking about here. Because we're not going to be sitting here and saying, we are all called to go and be missionaries and go and do this one specific example that we're going to all do.
Yeah.
Because in reality, living intentionally looks different for each person.
Mm-hmm.
There's one really good quote that I always go to. It's by Jim Elliot, one of the missionaries. And he says, wherever you are, be all there, which is like kind of a weirdly worded thing. But it basically means like God has placed you in the position that you're at for a reason. Yeah. Now, this could be overseas in Africa in like a rural village. This could be in China in a smaller church.
Right.
This could also just be in a day-to-day workplace. This can be at your school. This can be in the family that he's placed you in.
Right.
It's this view that no matter where you are, you're there for a reason, and God can use you to live intentionally there.
So it's kind of like wherever there are people and you are amongst them, that's where you need to be.
Exactly.
Right. There's kind of a lot of people all over the place, isn't
There's
there?
a couple of them. I've counted at least 4 today. So.
Yeah, in my going about my day, I ran into some people.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we all have this sphere of influence, right?
Yeah.
And I guess, like especially like you bring up that Acts passage, and it's almost like there's kind of like these like concentric circles of distance, right? And I think for simplicity's sake, we'll probably narrow that down to like people you're directly connected with, and then outside of that. So like within your sphere of influence and outside, which can kind of like allow you to broaden that and get connected there. But definitely there's a lot of opportunities like within your own sphere of influence, right?
For sure.
So think about like how you might serve your family, like how you might be like a witness for Christ within your family. And that's like if your family doesn't know Christ, boom, there's a great sort of avenue to serve them with the words of Christ, what we call like the gospel message, right? Telling people what Jesus has done for all of us, right? If you are in a family of believers, right? Amen to that. That's great, but there's ways to be kind and loving and serve your own family, right? You go a little bit further and there's like your friends, right? Kind of same thing. I mean, maybe you don't live with them, but there's ways to kind of like meet their needs and like bring the message, right? For me, like a big one is the community of the local church, right? And a lot of times you'll see these concentric circles of outwardness expressed within that, right? There will be needs to within the community itself of the church, right? I don't like it might be like helping out serve a meal or stack chairs or play on the worship team or be involved in some creativity or something like that, right? And a lot of times, and I know at Steele Heights, this is something that we're pretty intentional about, but making sure that we're serving the needs of our community, right? Getting connected with them, meeting their physical needs, their spiritual needs. And then, if a church is doing well, at some level, they're going to be connected to a global missionary, someone that they're partnering with that's getting really outside that circle. So, those are some spheres and some areas that you can find service in.
And I think one part of doing this, like when you look at the sphere of influence you have, it's easier to look at ways you can live intentionally at a church when it's already a focus of living in this Christian lifestyle. Yeah. But I think that there are more opportunities just within like your family, your friends, your local school, your workplace, whatever that may be. It's this idea of living in a way that might be opposite to what culture is telling you to live.
Like living counterculturally.
Exactly.
Living counterculturally. I got there. Like that's a great way to share the gospel, right? Because people need to see how that's lived out. And so when they see that kind of put into practicality, that speaks volumes.
Oh, huge.
As a way, So
it reminds me of another quote from another missionary. Gotta love it. I think his name was C.T. Studd. And he said
Stud.
he was a stud. It was great. But his quote was that the candle that shines the farthest, it shines the brightest at home. And like, again, there's all these like imagery, and English teachers would love this.
Why would they love that?
There's all this like, what does a candle look like, and how does like, what does it mean that it shines closer? And
yeah, well,
I was a math kid. I didn't fully understand it, but
well, unpack that a little bit. Like, what does that mean for?
It's this idea that you can shine far. You can go and put a ton of effort into these areas outside your sphere of influence. You can go and do missions all over the world. You can support missionaries. You can do all this stuff.
Yeah.
But in order to do that effectively far, you need to do this in your day-to-day life. You need to shine bright. You need to be effective at living intentionally in your inside your influence. In order to shine farther.
Like, I guess, like in terms of this analogy, like the further you get away from the candle, like the less bright it is, right?
Yeah.
So a candle is most effective when you're closer to it, right?
A mixture of that. It's just more like if you're a candle that's going to be really effective far, it means that you are really, really bright where you are. Like, you think about like a bright light. You think about like the sun.
Like how many lumens it is.
Yeah.
That's a measure of
brightness. Light.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've measured light.
Yeah.
But it's just important to remember that in order to do effective intentional living externally far out, you need to be effective first in your circle.
Okay. So what does that look like for you?
For me, I think that just means that, well, I'm a missions kid. I grew up and I went to a Bible college for that. So I love going overseas. I love being able to do something along those lines. But if I'm going to focus on helping those less fortunate outside of my sphere of influence, I need to have that same mentality with my family, with my friends, with my work. I can't just have that as this like separate view for outside of my sphere of influence.
Right. So it's almost like a consistency and integrity.
Yeah.
Right. If you're going to love people overseas, right? And the way I kind of define love is thinking outside yourself, right? Like serving other people, right? So if you're going to love people overseas, well, you need to love people in your close relationships as well. Yeah. So being a missions kid, a missions man, sounds like it sounds like a superhero.
I'll wear a cape if that makes more sense.
I would like to see that. Okay, we might have to post that on Instagram or something like that later.
We'll find a cape first.
You spoke it, so
great.
Yeah. So I mean, that definitely looks a little broader. Typically, when we talk about kind of missions, that looks a little broader than your sphere of influence. What's your experience with that?
I think that when people initially think about missions, their thought is that they're going to go to this like African village and build a house for people that live in straw huts. But I don't think... Can
you bless the rains?
If you want to. If you have the right song, if Toto is in the background playing, you'll be great.
Definitely look it up on YouTube.
Yeah, because people haven't heard that song yet. But I think that missions is broader than that. Missions doesn't have to be this, I'm going to travel overseas to a different continent and I'm going to help the orphans. I think that it's just looking for people that are just outside your sphere of influence and seeing the hurt that exists and trying to find ways to help. And like that is here in Edmonton. Like if you think about it, there are a ton of places just here in Edmonton that you could put a ton of time into.
Yeah, like there's Hope Mission. Yeah. Steele Heights is connected to the Mosaic Center. There's the Mustard Seed. They're doing some great work. Just alleviating poverty like within our own city. Right? Like we live here, so
exactly.
Our own city is accessible to us,
right?
Right. So those are some avenues that you can explore, right? So
I don't even think that it has to only be like a physical need. I think that it can also be the spiritual needs that exist within the community as well. There are people hurting right now, and for a number of reasons, especially with the current state of the world.
Yeah.
People that are struggling with isolation, people that are struggling with anxiety, people that just don't know where to turn to.
Mm-hmm.
It's an opportunity to share your faith. It doesn't need to be this huge preachy thing, but it can be a way to share where your hope is found to help.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus says that man does not live on bread alone, right? So there's physical needs, but, our own sinful state is causing, brokenness within ourselves,
Yeah.
right? Our destructive habits that sin brings about. And when we bring the word of Christ to those people, when we bring the peace of Christ to those people, right?
Yeah.
It fulfills that need too.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and makes a person whole.
Yeah.
It shaloms them.
Shaloms.
Look that up, guys. Go ahead. It's such a cool word. You look it up.
It's cool.
Shalom.
Shalom. I think.
I wish wholeness for you.
Wow.
I know, right?
I think what's cool about that is you don't need to travel overseas to provide that help, to find the ways to aid in where people may be hurting.
Like, it's simpler than that, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's simpler than buying like a plane ticket, which, I mean, right now is probably pretty hard.
Yeah, there's not a lot of places to travel at this
but
point.
you don't have to like put all of your earthly possessions into a backpack and grab a plane overseas.
Just grab one plane.
Just grab it.
Just grab it.
You don't need to physically distance from people, but that's weird. But yeah, like it can be so much simpler than when you say like serving or missions. Simplify, like just like it can be simpler.
Yeah.
Than this big thing in your head, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, in terms of kind of like the practical application, I'm going to let you kind of speak more on the mission side of that, because again, like people are called to different services.
Yes.
And that's important, right? I would say that a great place to start in serving. You're connected to this local church.
Yeah.
You're interacting. You're serving. You're getting involved.
Mm-hmm.
Like figure out like what needs are there.
Yeah.
And you can start there. Is a great place to explore. But what would you do if you did want to kind of like explore that kind of like global or kind of like outside of your sphere of influence?
I think that it kind of goes back to this idea of people often think that in order to do missions, you have to fly overseas and commit your entire life to helping the orphan children wherever.
Right, and that sounds daunting.
It sounds
right?
daunting.
Like
This huge thing that
to be honest, right? Like,
and like not everybody is called to do that.
Mm-hmm.
If you are, do it. I am 100% like here to support. If you have this calling to go overseas,
yeah,
go. But I think that it's simpler than that.
Yeah.
There are ways to contribute to these global issues without having to physically be there.
Mm-hmm.
There are a number of missionaries over the world, all around the world right now, that are actively working to help aid in poverty and human trafficking, ways to help those who are hurting the most.
Yeah.
And you can support them even from here at home.
Right.
And there are a lot of ways you can do that. Most people know about this idea of contributing financially because that's going to help a ton.
Sure, yeah.
But you don't have to give them this like chunk of money in order to be able to help them. It can be something simpler as just praying for them.
Okay.
Keeping them in mind, sending them support letters, just saying like, hey, I hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for what you're doing. Just hearing their stories.
Yeah, I mean,
that could
mean a lot, right? Like when they're kind of investing so much time away from their community. I mean, they're making community there, right? But they've come from a community to another community, right? And so they may be missing that, and that's like a great way to kind of like encourage.
I've often heard of people sending these like support care packages, which I think is the coolest idea.
Okay.
And they're just these things with just like specifically like Canadian snacks or just like things and comforts from home that they might be
like
missing.
Smarties.
Like only the good Smarties, like the chocolate ones, not like those
That's
little like American Smartie
right
knockoff things.
I figured this out when I went to California. what we call rockets, they call Smarties.
Yeah, like the chalky, like
Yes.
little circles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're right.
They're clearly rockets.
Yeah.
Smarties are little chocolate, like knockoff M&Ms. They're great.
Yeah.
But there are a number of ways that you can contribute here. And that is anywhere from a large, like, contributing financially to a missionary overseas, or honestly to something as small as talking to, like, your neighbor that you may not have talked to, that you don't know their name of, and just seeing how they're doing.
Right. In the book of James, I think it's James 2 verse
17?
Okay, 2 verse 17. It says, your faith without works is dead, right? Like,
Yeah.
you have this faith, I believe in God, right? But if it's not making its way into some sort of, like, intentional service, then it's dead. That's what James is saying.
Yeah.
Right? So, wherever you are, be all there.
Yeah.
Right? So guys, that's the challenge is for you guys to go to God, and I think a great way is to talk to people you trust, your family, and try to figure out what God's calling is on your life, right? We've been called to good works. That's what Christ has created us for, and that's going to look different for everybody, right? So that's really our challenge is to find that out, and that might look like you trying a bunch of things, so you can get in contact with pastors to try and help you figure out. I mean, you could always send Ryan and I a message, or your youth leader, and we'd love to try and help you figure that out, like where like a good area of service would be for you. But yeah, like, I don't know, there's not a whole lot going on right now. Taking some time to think about that right now would be a great thing to do with your time.
And I think one way that can really help that is by just taking a moment to look around you. Look in the environments that you're in. Look at your home. Look at your friend groups. Look at these places that God's put you in. And just look for ways. Ask God to give you that wisdom to point out where you can share your faith, where you can act differently than what culture's expecting, where you can live out your faith, you can live intentionally.
Yeah, so go out and serve.
This is so long. All right, see you guys next week. What was that ending?
I don't know.
I thought it was gonna be this little see you guys next week, and you just kept going. I'm like, I don't know if you're doing a song.
I think I might just like